This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 292 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're chatting about ethical animal experiences on your travels. So many times some of our tourist activities are connected to animals, and it's pretty important that we get these right. So we'll get to that in a second. I first want to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast. Of course, we also have plenty of amazing and very unique wildlife here. I've actually got a guest coming up soon to talk to some of that. But today, we're going to be talking about it in a more general way at first, and then we're heading off to India. So I've a long thought. In fact, I know I've talked about this before. I remember back probably 10 years ago now when I was heading off on a trip to Bali, my one and only time there, and a former student of mine, a French woman named Fanny, posted on my Facebook when I mentioned the trip. She said, "Don't ride an elephant," and made me think about that properly for the first time. And of course, you'll have heard me talk about that particular issue in many episodes since. But I think the important thing is that any time that your travels are going to include animals in some way, it's really good practice just to check in with whether or not these are going to be ethical experiences or not. So in this episode, I first chat with Nora Livingstone, who gives us a lot of interesting background on working with animals in tourism. It's something she's done for many years. And then Anuj, who you'll know as one of my favourite listeners and sometime guest, he's recently been back to his home country of India and seen lions in the wild. And of course, having listened to the podcast for many years, he's definitely one of those travellers who thinks about whether it's going to be ethical first. So it's a really, really good story to hear. So first of all, Nora Livingstone, who is the co-owner of Animal Experience International, tells us about that work and also introduces the idea of consent-based tourism for animals, which I find a really interesting one and a good way to think about it. So here's Nora.
When me and my business partner started Animal Experience International, we wanted to travel, we wanted to help animals, we wanted to do it ethically, but we both were sort of making it up because it was 11 years ago. She's a veterinarian and I went to school for anthropology and environmental studies. So we don't have any business knowing anything. So the really great thing was we got to make everything up, including what ethics looked like. We knew a high standard of welfare for animals. Doing some anthropology stuff. I knew a sort of high standard of working with humans. And I had done some research, and I was really lucky to volunteer and travel on my own before starting AEI. So we kind of knew on our heart, what would be the best practices and what would be the worst practices. But then with regenerative travel, the more that this phrase came up, the more we were like, oh, this is exactly what we do. This is exactly what we're passionate about. This is us going into a community and being hosted by that community and listening more than we talk to them and asking the questions, how can we help? What does it look like? What have you been doing? And what do you need more of? And so a really heartening thing about AEI is every time we travel somewhere, we travel because there's people directly helping animals in that community, which is so wonderful. And it means that there's professionals that were there before we were there. They are working when we have volunteers there, and they will be there when we're gone. And so regenerative travel is so wonderful because it's not just us going in with volunteers, if they are solo or on a group, and saying, this is how we are going to help you. And this is the expectations in our box. And this is what tourism will look like for us. It was this real aha and relief moment that was these are the words we're looking for. And this is what tourism should be, because tourism, like, we live in a capitalist society. Tourism could be a lot of taking. It could be a lot of, and oftentimes, and has been rooted in white supremacy and patriarchy and extraction. And so to think that we could regenerate, to think that we could actually give back in a real way, not just a way that made us feel good, felt so wonderful. And so in the pandemic, we were doing loads of not travel, like the rest of us, but loads of talking about travel. And I talked to a lot of universities and colleges and made up this phrase, consent-based tourism, for a bunch of different reasons. One of them was because I had a really hard time saying regenerative travel. And I was like, but I can pronounce consent.
That's a good reason in itself, but yes.
Trust me, I'm an expert, and you'll know that because I can pronounce things.
Yes.
And also, like, the consent model just made like a lot of sense for a lot of people at this point. We talk about consent in so many different ways. We talk about consent being a full body yes, something that you want to do or you are free to leave. There's no coercion, there's no bullying. And the way that we talk about it is the community doesn't just like accept you, you're invited into the community. In not just volunteering, in all tourism, the community, especially during and eventually after the pandemic, there will be communities that say, we don't want to have outsiders right now. We can't afford to get sick. Or they'll say, we can have visitors, we would love them, but please have, a vaccine, a mask, all these PPE, things like that. And so the community is consenting. It's a full body yes. They're able to revoke consent at any time and say, we thought yes, but maybe no now. The animals we work with, the same thing. The animals are not on tethers. They aren't in cages, not with chains. At any time, if there's an animal you're interacting with, it can walk away and say, I'm actually not into this. And then, so importantly as well, the traveler is the third very important part of consent-based tourism, because while we don't always know the words, or sometimes we can't pronounce the words, we know in our heart if something if we're consenting to something. And so we might not know like the theories. We haven't spent 10 years thinking about the theories and of ethics, but we know this just doesn't feel great. We have that ick and we can leave. Exactly. Yeah, that ick feeling.
The model where there's, these three parties involved, especially in wildlife tourism or animal tourism, where the ability for an animal to leave the situation is, is a really important aspect of it. Because there's a lot of animal interaction in tourism these days that still really leaves a lot to be desired. And even like that is something that even people who are not quite sure, or still really want to see, lots of animals up close, but that's a really straightforward thing that people can consider. Is this animal free to leave or not?
Yeah, I have a lot of people who will ask me, I saw this or I saw that. Is it ethical? And I think something like consent-based tourism is such an easy way to, you don't have to know the definition of even ethics. You just have to know, can't like, if you were that animal, would you feel comfortable doing it? Would you feel comfortable to leave? And I think knowing that all animals, including humans, are sentient beings, and knowing that all of us have this wonder when we see animals, sometimes we want to be able to bend the rules a little bit. But when you think about consent and you see this individual animal that has a preference for food and friends and temperature, then it becomes increasingly harder to bend those rules. And it's not something that you even grieve or feel bad about after. You go, well, this is the right thing. I'm not going to feel guilty later. And I would have loved to, do something that maybe 10 years ago we didn't realize was unethical. But now that I have this framework in my brain, I can say, you know what, even though I don't know, I do know in my heart.
I mean, so you've touched on something that I do want to just dig a little bit deeper on, because I think this is the real key to a lot of people's reluctance to be more ethical animal tourism. And that's the, oh, we used to do it. And, oh, I'd really like to cuddle a koala or something. Now, disclosure, I have cuddled a koala like 25 years ago before I thought about this, and, it was still readily available. In fact, my very first Facebook profile picture was me cuddling a wombat, which is my favourite Aussie animal, because that used to be something you could do at one of the other local wildlife parks here. Kind of really loved those experiences, but now I wouldn't do it. But I also think I've had those experiences before, so that's a bit easier. I don't, grieve it as much. So, I mean, what else do you say to people who are like, oh, but I just really want to cuddle a koala? Like, what else can we do to kind of get past that?
Yeah, it's so difficult, right? Because of course you want to cuddle a koala. They're
so cute.
They're made to be cuddled. They're so poofy. And I think, like Maya Angelou says, we did the best that we could at the time. And once we know better, we do better. And of course you want to cuddle a koala, but when you find out the cost of exploitation, suddenly you realize it's not worth it. And I think sometimes people think, well, it's just me and it's just once. But if you know how many people are going to be traveling this year, and of course I would grieve it too. I would love to cuddle a koala, but when you suddenly break that down and you realize that much exploitation, it's hard to do anything but grieve it. It's hard to not make the sort of correct decision. And I think we look at the root of tourism and we look at the accessibility of wild spaces and wild animals around the world. It's amazing that we are able to see so many wild things, and we as animals are able to interact with so many different species around the world. It is mind blowing that we're able to do these things, but we also have to consider our entitlement. And some animals don't need to be seen. Some places don't need to be trekked on. Some water doesn't need to be swam in. It is a sad reality, because wouldn't it be amazing to do absolutely everything? But I think that there's enough experiences on Earth that are not based in exploitation that we can do those and still have a very fulfilled life.
Lots of great food for thought there from Nora, and I will be thinking about that conversation every time I'm kind of wondering about the ethics of an animal tourism experience I'm considering. So thanks for that, Nora. Now, as I promised, we're off to India now, and Anuj, who is actually originally from Gujarat in India, but now lives in Melbourne, recently returned there and was able to visit the Gir National Park, which is the only place that you can see lions in the wild in India. And of course, he had investigated it before he went, and he knew that it's a pretty ethical kind of place. In fact, you do have to be careful. I was looking at it online, and there are some other operators who kind of have some other lion experiences nearby. But the actual official Gir National Park run by the government seems to be doing a good job, as you'll hear. And I'll let Anuj tell you about his fabulous experience seeing Asiatic lions in Gir.
So Gir National Park is the place where I went. It is situated in Gujarat, right, in India. This is the only place in India you can see lions in the wild, right? And they were almost extinct. So if you look at around the independence time, like 1950s, 60s, they were like 100, 120, something like that left. So they were put into this category called critically endangered, or even worse than that. I can't even remember. Highest possible critical endangered species, right? And they were dying. So there were a lot of older. So when they did the count back in the 60s, there were a lot of older lions. There were not a lot of cubs there. So government in 1960s launched this lion project, but it wasn't very successful back in the day. So they did manage to increase around 250 towards 1980s, 1990s, but nothing really happened, right? So in mid 2000, the CM of Gujarat, now the PM of India, Narendra Modi, he was chief minister, like he was a premier of Gujarat, and he sort of started this Save Lion project. What he did was unbelievable. So he went to the park and started employ people to understand the behavior of the lions, right? So what unique situation about Asiatic lions, which is Gir lions, is a lioness hunts, not the lion, right? So
Ah,
yeah, so lioness hunts for the cubs, right? The lions do hunt, but majority of the hunting done by the lioness. This is what
okay.
I've been told, right?
Yeah, right.
And obviously the lioness have the cubs, right? So what Modi did was he employed the girls in the forest, like as a ranger, as a guard. This is back in 2007. So it was very start of it. The biggest problem with lion conservation in the park was there was a human lion conflict. So obviously lion
Mm,
would wander around in the villages around the forest, and obviously may or may not kill, we don't know, right? But there is a fear, so then the
hmm
villagers would kill lions so that they protect their livestock, their family. Obviously that's a
hmm
reaction. So
Yeah.
Modi's idea was to hire women to make the villagers understand that, look, these animals are separate from you. And then he also launched a unbelievable lion conservation effort. So now from 2007, around 250, 300 lions. So now last count was almost 670, 700.
Mm.
And
Wow.
what they were saying is, because the count was done during COVID, they could very well be 8, 900 plus, right?
Wow. Amazing.
At least official count is 670 something, but there could be more, right?
Mm.
And that is crazy good. Like if you
Yeah.
look at that way, double triple the population in like 10, 15 years, that's a
Mm.
good effort. So in that, what he has done other than hiring the female guards is he created wind and solar energy bore.
Mm.
So he used the energy that is produced that will pump the water out of the ground and create this water pond for the animals, right? The
Wow.
third thing that he did was to introduce different herbivorous animals so that lion can hunt them. So the problem was that the
Ah.
villagers had all the livestock, right? So lion can only eat meat, right? So
Yeah.
they used to attack the livestock, and then it created the conflict. So what they did was to introduce deers and sambas and Nil guys, and all those different animals inside the forest, so that
Right.
lions can have an option, right? So it's like us, like he created more options for lions. So they started
hmm
hunting non-livestock. So that
hmm
reduces everything, right? So
Perfect.
now the population is going crazy, and then there are more cubs than like there are more cubs than the female lions right now,
Right.
which is a
Yeah. Wow.
great sign, right? Because that means the population is going to explode anytime. The
hmm
problem is going to be that the sanctuary is like 1400 square kilometer long, 1400 square kilometer only,
Mm.
and there is 650, I mean 700 odd lions in there. So
Yes.
there
It's
is
going to get too small.
it is,
So they're
and
going to be too successful.
they're too successful. So the funny part is, when where we were staying, which is about a kilometer outside the gate of the national park, on the day one the lion wandered outside our gates of the resort that we were staying,
Oh
and
my goodness.
the people outside, they were saying, oh, there were lions outside. And I was like, oh yeah, right now we are in the thick of the action. Because we didn't see it, we were sleeping,
Oh
and
my goodness.
they were all telling us, and we were like, oh wow, I mean, that is a real problem, right? So the lions will
Well, yes,
wander out.
exactly. Now, what do they do?
Yeah,
Yeah. What do they do to solve that?
so there is another problem that they are looking at is they are creating another national park somewhere else to
Uh huh.
move the lions from where they are into that national park. Now there is a conflict between two states right now, where my state, which is Gujarat, is doesn't want to give out lions to other state because that's the only place in India has lions. So that's a funny part. And
Yeah.
then there is
Yeah.
another state that has lots of space. They are like, we're ready, but Gujarat is like, it
We
will.
don't want to give them up.
Yeah, we don't want to give them up. It's like a heritage, right? So it's like you're
Yes.
protecting your own
Yes.
asset, which is fine, but they'll sort out that problem soon, I think.
Tell me about your experience in the park.
We went in the morning safaris as well as like late afternoon safaris, right? So morning we were getting up at 5:30, 6 o'clock we start the safari. It's a 3 hour safari, right? So
Okay.
what I understand is even though it's a 3 hour safari, your sighting is only gonna be like 5 minutes, maximum 5 minutes, right? That
Yep.
5 minutes you spend, and you spend 3 hours, and that 5 minutes is the only thing you remember out of all this. So so every day we had sighting, right? So
Wow.
we had an amazing guide. He was unbelievable. So we hired him for all days, and we did 3 morning safari and 1 afternoon safari. And every day so he was so good, and the driver, and he knew exactly how to spot the lions and everything. So the day one, we saw two adult male lions together. So apparently they were brothers. And the lions were like chilling, and they're looking and they're posing for us. And one of the lions looked at my camera directly, and I clicked one of the picture, and they are the best. I mean, one of the best pictures I've ever taken. I
Oh,
think
that's
not
awesome.
one of the best. It is the best picture I've ever taken. Like directly into my camera, and then I click, 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 and then it was amazing. So next day we went, we saw a lion and a lioness. Everybody was like awestruck because this is a young lion, young lioness, right? Younger, like prime
Yeah,
age,
yeah. Yep.
and
Amazing.
like very, very good looking, right? The wild lions are somehow super good looking. The next morning, it was, I think, very early start, like 5 a.m. We had to start very early, and we
Okay.
had like back to back early morning, so we tired a bit. But this time it was so funny. The moment we entered the park, there's the pride,
Oh,
literally.
wow.
So
Really?
yeah, two lioness, three cubs, and our car, because we were slightly behind everybody, so we were at the end of the everyone, right? So we couldn't get into the front. So then everybody was told to let go, like let the lion go, because it will create a chaos, because they were walking towards somewhere, right? Our
Uh-huh. Okay.
guide, he knew exactly what the lion was, where the lion is going to end up with that walk, and where. So he just nailed it, and he went to somewhere, I don't know where. I mean, obviously in the middle of jungle,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
parked there for 40 minutes, like did nothing, just parked
And
there,
just you guys
just
are
our
there,
car,
nobody else?
nothing.
Yep, okay.
And there the same lions came to us,
Wow.
literally. So we switched off, like we're not doing anything, like
Just
we.
sitting there,
And I was
quiet,
like,
yeah.
oh my god, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I'm like, what are we doing?
Amazing.
And then we saw, like, my wife just saw the land, and she's like, oh, it's there, it's there, it's there. I'm like, where is it? Because they were far and coming towards us, right,
Right.
from the forest. And they camouflage really well because they have the same color of
Of
the
course.
dust, right? They started coming towards us, right? So you have a lioness in front, I think that's the mother, and then three cubs, and then the younger lioness at the back, so they protect them, right? So
Right.
lioness,
Okay.
then we stopped, and then the lioness walked past our car. So I'm talking, we are sitting in a car, and the lioness was 2 feet away,
Wow.
and it was first scary, second exciting, and third, where is my camera? I need to shoot this. So
Yeah.
so they were so close that I had that zoom lens, and I couldn't fit it in my zoom. I had to zoom out, and I couldn't fit it in my zoom. So
Yeah.
I couldn't take a single good picture of that moment that
Yeah,
went
yeah.
past.
That was so close,
It
yeah.
was so close. They were
Wow.
so close. And then the fourth day, we went to another smaller safari, but it was in the afternoon, like
Mm-hmm.
evening. Not even afternoon. And we saw 9 lions together.
Wow.
There was that massive pride, and they
Oh
just
my
casually.
goodness.
We were going into the route, and this time the guide was like, okay, we were all relaxed because we've seen 10 lions already, and we were like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
fine, even if we didn't see anything. So guide was also like, the guide and the drivers were also relaxed, and they were like, oh yeah, we might see some now. And they were like, they were
But
not
no
even
one's stressed about
no
it.
one
It's
stressed
just a
about it.
casual
And
drive.
then
Yeah.
suddenly we were driving, and there is this like a lion cub sitting next to us, and he's like, this is the fastest break we have ever done. It's like, what the whole car slide in front. And then
Oh, no
we
way.
sat there, and we were like, okay. Then the other cub came from the jungle inside, and then he was like looking at us, and then sat down, relaxed. And then the whole pride came around. So the mom came around, and then rest of the family came around, and we were like,
Wow.
what is going on? Like, is this
That's
something?
crazy.
It was so crazy. The whole family came around. It was one by one by one by one, and then they were playing around, and they were like, "Dude, we
Oh,
are here. Don't you get scared of anyone?"
that's
So
amazing.
yeah, that was so nice. This is
Oh, wow.
why.
What a way to end your
Oh,
safaris.
that was amazing, unbelievable.
I absolutely loved hearing from Anuj about his amazing lion experience and felt like I was there. I'm going to share in the show notes a couple of links where you can see some of Anuj's pictures and videos from that experience, which are fabulous. So thank you for sharing that. I've actually got some more from our conversation, some more details about the conservation side of the Gir National Park, which I will share in a future episode. So, thank you so much for listening to episode 292 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. If you want to know some more about what we've discussed, you can find out more about Nora Livingstone's organisation, Animal Experience International, which is at the very logical website, animalexperienceinternational.com. I'll also, in the show notes, leave a link to Anuj's Instagram, which is his Instagram handle is Anuj PH, ANUJPH, and also to the official site of the Gir National Park. But that website is actually only available when you're actually in India. So that's a bit of a trick, but I'll leave the link in the show notes as well. Come and share your thoughts and your own experiences in our groups. We've got the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers and the LinkedIn group. You can find both of them just by searching for Thoughtful Travellers in those platforms. And of course, all of these links and more will be in the show notes. For today's episode, they are at notaballerina.com/292. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.